As you can see behind me, I'm in the great city of Rome. I arrived yesterday. Today's my first full day in Rome. I'm here for the Synod of 2018 on the theme of youth, faith, and vocational discernment. I thought I would take the opportunity to tell you a little bit about this synod, but also synods in general. What are they? They came up out of Vatican II. So just behind me there in St. Peter's, back in the early 1960s, bishops from all over the world gathered there to talk about the life of the church, and of course many changes came from it. Well, a lot of the fathers wanted to continue not having a council, every 3 years, but something like a council. And so, roughly speaking, every 3 years from 1965 until now, there's been a synod, which is a smaller gathering of bishops from around the world to look at a particular issue in the life of the church. So over the years, from Paul VI through John Paul II, Pope Benedict, etc., we've talked about a lot of things, from seminaries and priestly formation to bishops to the laity to women, etc. So for this synod, we're talking about young people and the outreach to young people. The word, synod is a Greek term. It just means really to walk together. So the idea is bishops coming together from around the world and then in unison trying to understand some issue in the life of the church more deeply. Its ultimate purpose is always to advise the Pope. So a synod does not have legislative authority. Synods don't vote and then determine the teaching of the church. Rather, it's really in this elaborate way to give advice to the Pope. So typically what happens after a synod is the Pope will write a statement that sums up the findings of these discussions. Now, it goes on for quite a while. This is a whole month here in Rome. So tomorrow we start with a Mass, and that's October the 3rd. We end on October the 28th. So it's a full workout. And it's also an all-day affair. We start at 9 o'clock. We go till about 1 o'clock, and then the Roman system, you take a kind of break for lunch and a little siesta. And then about 4 o'clock, we resume and go till 7:15. And this is Monday through Saturday. So it's a pretty intense process. They give each synod father, so all those who participate are called synod fathers, they give each of us 4 minutes to make an intervention. But then that's followed up by what they call discussions in the circuli minores, the small circles or small discussion groups. So they will take place in the Paul VI audience hall in these little breakout sessions. And they're divided by language groups. So we have English and Spanish and Italian and French and German, I think. And many who've been involved in synods have said to me, that's where the real action is. So we do indeed listen to all the speeches, but when we get together in the small groups and we kind of talk the issues through, that's where things really get interesting. I've talked to a lot of people who've been involved. This is my first synod, but they've said that the great thing is meeting people from around the world, from all over the church. They've come here now for this, and just hearing the different perspectives, meeting different people. The process itself, as I say, is a bit of a workout, and everyone says that. It's a bit of an effort, to sit through these lengthy days of speeches. But, it's something that's really healthy, I think, in the life of the church. I went over today to the Paul VI Hall, where the synod will be held, and I picked up my credentials, so we have a little, badge and so on. And it also gave us our seating assignments. So you don't just come into the synod hall and sit wherever you want. It's very carefully calibrated. So the cardinals and the top curial people sit right up in front near the Pope. Then you come back through the archbishops and the bishops. Well, then people like me, auxiliary bishops, we're way in the back of the hall. So it's actually a pretty small space. So there aren't any bad seats. Everyone can see and hear fine. But I'd be way up near the back of the hall. I'm looking forward to it. I think it will be a bit of a workout the whole month, but I think it'll be a very interesting experience at the same time. Also in our packet was a nice little booklet form of what they call the Instrumentum laborious, Latin for, the instrument of work, or like the working document. And I had read it this past summer, and I've been rereading it since I got to Rome. It's the basis for our conversations. I think in some future videos, I'll talk more about the real substance of the Instrumentum laborious, but that will be the substance of our discussion. We'll be commenting upon it, questioning it. It's a working document. It doesn't mean it's what we're going to say at the end of the synod, but it's a place to begin. I thought maybe I'd say just a few things about it in the course of this video. It's structured according to kind of a classic form, namely see, judge, and act. Now this goes back to St. Thomas Aquinas, but it comes up in the 20th century in the young Christian worker movement and the Catholic family movement, etc. The idea is simple, that a Christian should see, first of all, what's going on in your world. If you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're a homemaker, you're a teacher, see what's going on in your world. Secondly, judge in light of the gospel. How do you evaluate what you see? And then finally, on the basis of that judgment, act. So I think that's how the Instrumentum is structured. The first section is all about seeing. What's going on now in the lives of young people? So the document is kind of front-loaded with a lot of anthropology and sociology and psychology, looking at the dynamics of young people's lives. There's a fair amount about social media, which I found kind of interesting, how that's affecting young people. But everything from globalization to family and to the breakdown in family relationships, and all these things are talked about. Then the second section, which is more the judging section, is how do you evaluate all this in light of the gospel? And actually this section I thought was quite rich in terms of its biblical references. It talks, for example, about Samuel and Eli. So Samuel, this young kid who hears the voice of the Lord but doesn't know what to do with it, doesn't know how to interpret it, until Eli comes along and helps him. Well, the document says that that's the role of a lot of elders and parents and mentors in the church, is to be Eli to a new generation of Samuels. Talked about the rich young man and cites John Paul II, who used the image of the rich young man in his great encyclical Veritatis Splendor. Talks about Solomon, who as a young man asked the Lord quite correctly, not for riches and fame and power, but asked for wisdom of heart. So I thought that was an interesting section. How do we evaluate, how do we judge our experience in light of the scriptures? And then finally, the last section is called choosing. It's about acting. Now, what vocational path do I find? So that's one of the motifs of the Synod: youth, faith, and vocational discernment. So my life isn't about me, as I've said 1,000 times. My life is an adventure to discover what God desires for me. So the third part is all about how we choose and discern our vocations. Anyway, I'll say more about it as I go, but that's the structure of the Instrumentum. And we'll be looking at it now as Synod Fathers for the next 4 weeks. We begin and end with prayer. So we begin with Mass tomorrow with the Pope. And that's just, in itself, it's a powerful thing. Whenever bishops of the world get together around the successor of Peter, it's a very powerful expression of the life of the church. So that's how we begin tomorrow. I'm eager to hear what the Pope says in his homily. Then tomorrow afternoon, we have a session. And it's largely, I think, the Pope, again, sort of laying out for us what he wants us to look at. Anyway, we're getting started. That's the work tomorrow. And what I hope to do now is give you updates as we go on what's going on, what we're talking about, and how we're coming to this important discernment in the life of the church.